the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. My name is Chris, I am at WistfulSelby on Twitter, and today I'm bringing you a deck tech for Celestine, the Living Saint. Celestine is a 5-mana, 3/4 flying, lifelinking human warrior from the Warhammer 40k Commander decks. She has Healing Tears. At the beginning of your end step, return target creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. And that's what we're playing around. So, we have a whopping 38 creatures in this deck, and about this many of them self-sacrifice. So, if you don't want your opponents casting non-creature spells, you have Hope of Ghirapur. If you need to protect any of your stuff, you have Elciate of Life's Bounty, Selfless Savior. If you want to protect your whole board, you have Selfless Spirit. Do you need to gain a bunch of life so that you can trigger Celestine and return one of our bigger threats to the battlefield? You've got Martyr of Sands. Bounty Agent is a great way to keep legendary creatures under control in this format that revolves around legendary creatures. Cathar Commando can deal with any artifact or an enchantment you're having a problem with. Burnished Heart is one of our best ramp sources, as we can return it over and over and over again, getting 2 lands each time. Solitude is one of our best removal spells that not only will self-sacrifice because of its evoke ability, but can also deal with any creature your opponent has that you have a problem with. And then here's the best creature in the deck, Ranger Captain of Eos. CEDH All-Star, this thing can find 1-mana creatures, which, as you've already seen, we have about 1 million of. It can also self-sacrifice to keep our opponents from casting non-creature spells on their turn, and because of its 3 mana value, Celestine brings it back over and over and over again. Next, we have a couple of cards in our protection suite, Giver of Runes and Mother of Runes. If you've got a Skrell, it's another great card. We can find them with Ranger Captain. They can protect our creatures both offensively and defensively. One of the great things about Wyzet's catch-up ramp, we have Deep Gnome Terrormancer, probably the best version of this effect in the deck, along with Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Warhound. Speaking of ramp, everyone's favorite, Solemn Simulacrum. Not only does it find you lands, it also draws you cards because we run a bunch of sacrifice effects. Speaking of card advantage, we're in white, so we kind of have to do as best we can. So we have Mangara the Diplomat, White's Crown. If you've ever played with Crown, it's a good card, you should play it. Mangara is not as good as Crown, but not bad. You have Ranger of Eos, Ranger Captain's bigger brother. This one finds 2 1-drops, but it doesn't self-sacrifice. So if we want to loop it, we have to try a little bit harder. Rumor Gatherer is actually really cool, because if we can play a creature and then return a creature with Celestine, we get to scry one and draw a card across our turn. Recruiter of the Guard is fantastic. You should play it. It tutors for creatures. We have to do what we can, and this is a really great one. It also dies to Skull Clamp, which will draw you cards, and then you can bring it back with Celestine, because again, of that critical 3 mana value. Welcoming Vampire is awesome. It is a 3 mana value, you'll see a trend here, 2/3 flyer that helps us draw cards when our little creatures enter the battlefield. As you might notice, we also have a lot of those. Here's Archivist of Ogma, one of the super great card draw engines that we can play now. If your play groups likes to search a lot, either with fetch lands or if they're just, you know, playing the color green, Archivist got your back. He also gains a life, which is sweet. Esper Sentinel, everyone's favorite 1 mana Rhystic Study. It's 1 mana, so you can find it with Ranger Captain, just like in CEDH. It's also a 1/1, so it dies to Skull Clamp. It's also an artifact for, you know, stuff. And then one of our newest additions, Lorna the Third Path. It's 3 mana, 2/1 with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, it destroys an artifact or enchantment. So we finally have our own Reclamation Sage. But wait, there's more. This also helps us draw cards. And if you have a friend at the table, or if somebody is just like not doing anything, you can help them draw a card and also draw cards yourself. We have a little bit of interaction in our creatures in Skyclave Apparition. Also, 3 mana value. In order to help Celestine out, we have Sun Titan, one of my favorite cards in white, one of the reasons that I play this deck, and is kind of just another Celestine. He's great. Play Sun Titan. We also have Revelark and Karmic Guide. Not only do they bring things back on their own, but with the 2 of them and an Altar of Dementia, which you'll see later, you can actually combo out and mill the entire table. It wouldn't be Magic 30 without an Elishnorn. Here we've got Elishnorn. Now this is the old one. It helps pump our little creatures up to make sure that they're actually a lethal threat, while simultaneously killing out a bunch of our opponent's little threats that would otherwise chump block us. We play Battle Angels of Tyr because it's a really cool card. The art looks sweet and it has a ton of value attached to it, and we're in white, so we need our value where we can get it. Speaking of Ranger Captain of Eos, here's a Sarah's Ascendant, a awesome creature that you can go grab that is not only massive and can apply a lot of pressure, but it has lifelink, and it will gain you 6 life, which is a lot. To end out our creatures, we've got 2 sections. We've got the combo cards with Walking Ballista, Triskelion, and Heliod. A lot of you are probably familiar with this combo. You give one of these 2 lifelink, remove counters to shoot things, and Heliod replaces those counters. And we also play Legacy All-Star, Auriok Salvagers, also known as Bomberman. We have an LED in the deck, which if you don't, because it's expensive, I understand. I was very lucky to get it early. I wouldn't play this unless you're playing the LED. All right, and then we wouldn't be white if we didn't have a couple of stacks effects. Now, I know a lot of people don't like stacks, so you don't have to play these cards. But if you want to start Discourse, we've got a Draenith Magistrate. We also play Archon of Emeria because it's a sweet flyer. It makes our opponents only cast 1 spell, and it slows everybody down. And then one of my personal favorites, Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Do you hate your opponents playing green? Do you hate your opponents playing Mana Dorks? Do you hate your opponents playing activated abilities? Linvala's got your back. Next, we're going to move on to the non-creature, non-land cards. We're going to start off with the boring stuff. We have a Soul Ring, we have a Wayfarer's Bauble, a Land Tax, and Archaeomancer's Map. Here's that LED we were talking about. We're in white. We have to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel when it comes to ramp. I don't play an Arcane Signet because I don't know why. That's a great question. I should probably add that card. All right, we've got a couple of card draw effects. We've got our Skull Clamp. We play a lot of 1 toughness creatures, and this is a great way to draw cards. We have a Well of Lost Dreams. We like to gain life, and this is maybe not the best way to draw cards, but paying 3 mana after a Celestine is hit to draw 3 cards really isn't that bad. I know a lot of people aren't super high on Secret Rendezvous and Cut a Deal because they let your opponents draw cards, but they let us draw more cards. And again, we're in white, so we kind of have to play to what we're good at. And then Takasi's Welcome. It's another welcoming vampire that triggers when we play small creatures. We have a lot of those. All right, next up, we have a couple of cards to help us reanimate things. An Altar of Dementia, like we talked about a little bit earlier, and also an Underworld Cookbook. This card pulls double duty, or triple duty rather, because not only does it let us discard creatures to reanimate, it also can pull stuff out of our graveyard, and food tokens gain us life. So this is a great card. Altar of Dementia is kind of like a card advantage engine if we're just going to be able to pull things out of our graveyard all the time. So we sack them to mill ourselves, which gives us more options to bring back with Celestine. Next, we have our interaction suite, and there's a lot of it. Winds of Abandon is not only just a good single target removal spell, but it's also one of our Wrath effects that we play. Vanquish the Horde is the best Wrath effect that we play. For only 2 mana, you can kill everything. It's White's Blasphemous Act, and people should be playing more of this card. Soul Partition, along with Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares, are really great single target removal spells. Angel's Grace and Teferi's Protection are effects that will keep us from losing the game in awkward spots. Teferi's Protection might cost 3 mana to hold up, but if you can afford it, then it'll keep you safe. Next we have Silence. We run a couple of other Silence effects, and this one's the best one. You should play this card. And finally, we have Flawless Maneuver. It is the only free card that we play in our deck, but it's the best way to protect our board of little critters from dying to our removal spells. And the great thing about Flawless Maneuver, along with Teferi's Protection, is you can cast Vanquishing Horde for just 2 mana, hold priority, and cast one of these instants to be able to protect your board, creating a one-sided board wipe. We do run Enlightened Tutor, 1 because I have it, and 2 because it finds either Walking Ballista or Heliod or Triskelion. We have a couple of Reanimator effects in here as well, with Savine's Reclamation and Abiding Grace. These cards are awesome. Abiding Grace will gain us life if we need it to, but more often than not, it's going to be returning 1 mana value creatures from our graveyard to play, and Savine's is going to get back 3 creatures over the course of its lifetime. We do play Touchdown, also known as Approach of the Second Sun, just as a 1-card win condition all on its own. Which leads us finally to our lands. We don't have a lot of interesting ones, but there are a couple that I wanted to highlight, along with a bunch of black and white plains. We do play Amiria's Call because it does give us an option to create some 4/4s in the late game if we have the mana. Amiria's Sky's Rune is another way to bring back creatures if we've got a bunch of planes in play. Urza's Saga finds a lot of our 1 mana artifacts that we want, especially Skull Clamp. Find Skull Clamp. High Market and Mirren are sack outlets that we can play, both of which gain us life. And then Idyllic Range is another one that I want to talk about. We play fetch lands, so we play this so that we can put +1/+1 counters on Celestine and make her bigger, which makes it easier to reanimate some of our larger creatures. Finally, we have Corehaven, Nykthos, and Ancient Tomb. These are just solid all-around utility lands, the last 2 creating a bunch of mana, and Corehaven is our white Mazavith. And that was Celestine, the Living Saint. I'm Chris. I'm Wistful Selby on Twitter. It's been awesome, y'all.